And now for more, we welcome Miriam Schler, the Executive Director at the Tel Aviv Crisis Center for Sexual Assault, joining us from Tel Aviv. Miriam, thank you so much for joining us. The urgency to get all the hostages home could not be more clear. Earlier in this broadcast, in fact, we heard from Amit Soussana, who of course was freed in the first hostage deal, speaking out about the horrors she endured in captivity. Now, of course, she'd spoken to the New York Times before, but now she's speaking to a White House conference, and she says it's harder to stay silent than it is to speak. Your response to her chilling testimony, so powerful.
It's extremely powerful, and it's not to be taken for granted at all, because it's a huge endeavor and it's really, really, really difficult journey. Most survivors of sexual assault are not able at all to come forward with their story because of the stigma, because of the price that they pay. That's been one of the biggest tragedies of this entire massacre and atrocity and everything that's happened since October 7th, because anyone that deals with sexual assault knows that it's a very, 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 very difficult process. And it's something that has horrifying implications on the soul and on the body, and it's really difficult for people to come forward. They're filled with shame. There's a huge price for them to pay, as I said. And so part of what was going on after October 7th was, with the world's denial of sexual assault, there was increasing pressure on survivors to come forward, which is not the natural course for most survivors. Most survivors need a lot of time to process what happened, to be able to take their own pace without having to feel like they have to be the martyr, or they have to be somebody that's actually being used in a way to show what happened and so that people believe us.
Right.
That's one of the big tragedies of what happened, because in this case, what happened on October 7th, we have way more evidence than we ever have in cases of sexual assault. Normally, it's cases of he said, she said. Here we have testimonies of pathologists. We had testimonies of hostages. We had testimonies of doctors who examined, of people of Zaka who examined. We had eyewitness testimonies of gang rapes.
Right.
We had the terrorists themselves with their footage and with their testimonies. And there was a horrible amount of pressure still by the world that was denying what was going on, that they weren't believing it, or if it happened, it was justified because of the occupation. And there was a huge amount of pressure on survivors to come forward, which is just not something that is that can be good in any way for survivors.
And to that exact point, there seemed to be a deafening silence. And as you say, Hamas themselves filmed the atrocities, the depravity, the brutality on the 7th of October. And yet we didn't hear from women's groups. We didn't hear from international human rights organizations. At this conference, this White House conference, Kamala Harris, the vice president, speaking about what she'd heard, speaking about Amit and her courage. She says, Kamala Harris says, that maybe when more hostages are released, there will be more testimonies like this. Well, that is a worry for her, but that won't surprise anybody here. Of course, there would be more testimonies. What do you make of the fact that it's taken world leaders, including female world leaders, so long to hear what happened, to listen to what happened on the 7th of October?
That's been one of the tragedies of this whole, as if there haven't been enough tragedies, but that's been one of the most overwhelmingly horrible facts about what's happening, and it's been impossible for us to wrap our heads around it. How is it possible for all of these feminist organizations, these human rights organizations, these people who have been advancing the whole Me Too movement and the whole point of that we believe victims, we believe survivors, and all of a sudden that all that just was just thrown down the drain. We don't believe them anymore. And what we saw is the people that were saying it didn't happen at all, or it happened and it's justified because of the occupation. There's never, ever an excuse for rape. And the fact that people are making excuses or not wanting to believe it, or putting all kinds of categories and classifications and if and buts, that's been one of the horrible the results of what's been going on. And the fact that she was able to speak at the White House and have such powerful support from Kamala Harris, that's something that was obviously extremely empowering. But again, it's a big, huge price to ask for survivors, and they shouldn't be having to make that sacrifice. Obviously, if it does good for someone, each person should have to make their own choice. And if it's something that's on the journey of healing, that's great. But like Amit said, that staying silent is just so horrifying, because it's impossible to believe that the world still does not believe or is denying what happened.
Horrifying indeed. And Amit herself says she cannot heal as long as the captives there continue to suffer. And she's promising, obviously, to do everything she can to urge for some kind of deal, to some kind of good news, to make sure that there can be some kind of outcome that gets all the hostages back home. Very briefly, there is a disturbing concern. We heard that top health expert, Dr. Chagai Levine, saying that no one is responsible for the rehabilitation of freed and rescued hostages here in Israel. Briefly, is that your assessment, your take on how prepared Israel is to help deal with hostages, survivors, people coming home, people rescued?
I think we're going to see a huge overflow of just trauma all over the place that people are going to be needed to be taken care of. People who are in captivity, people who suffered from October 7th. We saw what happened in the first few months, that the government didn't function at all. This is going to take an entire society is in complete trauma. We're not talking about post-trauma. Everybody's in the thick of the trauma right now. And what looks ahead for us, what's in store is just even way more challenging than what we've seen until today. And there has to be some sort of government program to help take care of all of these people in the trauma, definitely the hostages, but not just. People have just suffered horrible trauma from everything that happened on October 7th, and survivors of sexual assault in general have been severely triggered by these events. It doesn't even need to be people who are taken hostage. It's these entire events are extremely triggery and extremely detrimental to survivors in general.
Miriam Schler, we could discuss this
before we go. It's just extremely important for me, anyone that's hearing me, if we're talking about trigger, we have the rape crisis centers all over Israel. 1202, a line for women, 1203, a line for men. We're here for you. We believe you. We want to hear you. Please call.